Taking a look out again, a lot of blue skies still, but we're starting to see those clouds building in, and that will thicken up as we're heading into the afternoon. But it's a gorgeous shot there. It's a little muggy out there, and again on day 2 of fall and day 2 of it not feeling like fall, but maybe by Thursday we'll start to feel a little bit better. Right now it is 72 out there, and that dew point's way on up there. It's a little muggy, but at least there's a little wind, but it is out of the southwest, so it's a warm wind and keeping us up there. Today, hour by hour, again, we are going to have this weather impact alert. It begins at 1 o'clock. We can start to see some of those storms building north of the metro, but I think here in central Arkansas, probably going to start to see that probably 6, 7 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. We're going to have to see how they move through. But I wanted to show you live radar right now. We already have some storms beginning to build around the Fayetteville area and that Missouri border there. We are seeing that move through pretty quickly. Some of those are giving some really heavy rainfall, so maybe keeping their temperature down a little bit. That was the area that I was really concerned about as we were heading into the afternoon for possible tornado activity. Again, very low threat, but they're going to have that heat of the day, but maybe this will cool them a little bit, but it's still early. There's probably still time to warm things up. So let's time things out for today. Again, around the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to start to see that development to our north, and we're going to start to see things pushing through. This is around 5:30 today. So clouds pushing through. Again, those could be very heavy, and we could see some hail, also some very gusty winds, and that isolated tornado. Again, I think most of that isolated tornado threat is going to be the northwest Arkansas area, but I can't rule it out here just because of the timing that it's getting here. It could have just that little bit of energy left. This is going to be around 11 p.m. So as you are going to bed, we're still going to have some very strong storms, but Simone's going to be here overnight. I'm coming in extra early, and we're going to stream and get you through these storms. Again, they could be loud at times, but we'll get them as they're approaching central Arkansas, and again then as they are heading out as well. That way everyone's covered and you know what's going on. You know when it's good just to go ahead and get a good night's sleep. This is around 2:30 in the morning, still seeing some linger and pushing into southern Arkansas at this point. Now this is around 7 a.m. So the big question is, will we have this activity as we are heading out, and will Ashley's job be a little bit more tiresome tomorrow morning for traffic? That's the big question. At this point, I would go ahead and plan to maybe leave a little bit early, especially if you have to be somewhere on time, because the roads are going to be wet. And so that's something to think about, but it's just how much the system does move to our south. This is around 10 a.m. We're still seeing a few spotty showers, lots of clouds, but most of that activity again in southeastern Arkansas. And then we're going to start to clear out a little bit, and it's going to start to feel a little bit more like fall. Now that severe weather risk is a 2 out of 5. Again, mainly damaging winds being the biggest threat, but we could see some smaller hail. And once again, I'm really thinking this northwest Arkansas area is more prone to that isolated tornado. Very isolated, low threat, but keeping that in mind. And flooding is a concern as well. We've got that flood watch till tomorrow at 1 p.m. So keeping that in mind, make sure you're staying weather aware, especially in these overnight hours.
Hello, welcome to WeatherWise. I'm your host, meteorologist Nathan Scott. This episode of WeatherWise will be dealing with flash flooding and flash flood safety that you need to know. When this was taped, they just experienced one of the worst flash flooding events in Texas, and I'm talking about the Guadalupe River, which rose about 30 feet within an hour. They really weren't prepared for how fast that river was going to rise, but flash flooding does happen anywhere across the United States, and we are familiar with that here in Arkansas. What develops a flash flood? How does it all come together? Well, it's really a perfect storm, and you have to have a lot of moisture in the atmosphere for this to happen, but some of the leading factors would be slow moving thunderstorms, just because there's not a lot of steering currents in the upper parts of the atmosphere, maybe remnants of a tropical storm or a hurricane that provides just a boatload of moisture from the Gulf, from the Atlantic or the Pacific to produce storms that can just really dump a lot of rainfall in a short amount of time. And then also stalled out boundary. If a front is just stalled out across the region, you have what's known as training of storms, and that's just storm after storm after storm that can line up over the same location that can also produce copious amounts of rain. And don't want to forget, another area could be snowmelt. If there's snowmelt happening over the mountains along with heavy rainfall, that can also lead to flash flooding for the smaller creeks and streams. What is the difference between a flash flood and a flood? That's something that you should know, and a lot of people get confused. A flash flood, well, it's called a flash flood because it happens quickly or in a flash. Less than 6 hours is typically the time frame. during or after a torrential rainfall event. And it's the deadliest storm hazard because people don't know that it may be coming downstream when it's sunshine and there's nothing happening in their neighborhood, but there's a flood wave coming from locations that could be several miles away or 10 to 20 miles away. And that's just because heavy rain may happen several counties away that all flow into that tributary or creek. Meanwhile, a flood, you've got plenty of time to usually prepare for because it's a long-term event. It's usually a slower event that unfolds. We had it happen here, of course, with the Arkansas River just a few years ago. We saw it coming and we warned you the Arkansas River is going to go up. Here's the forecast, and you had plenty of time to prepare, but also this impacts a lot more surface, a lot more land, and usually is more expensive in terms of storm damage. Let's go over to Storm Track 11 now. When we talk about rivers and creeks, you have to talk about the watershed. You learned this in science class, but let's do a recap. This is the watershed of the Arkansas River. It starts, of course, in Colorado, which you may not think about. But yes, it starts due to snowmelt happening in the Rocky Mountains, and there may be some spring influence as well. But that all flows its way from Colorado through Kansas, through Oklahoma, and into Arkansas. We experienced a flood event here in 2019 from May to June. The reason behind that is not because we saw heavy rain here in Arkansas, but because we saw heavy rain happen over Kansas and Oklahoma, between Wichita and Tulsa. And all that rain went into all those little rivers that you see right there and eventually flowed its way into the Arkansas River, hence led to significant to record flooding of the Arkansas River. We can take a look at other watersheds and break them down because every river has a watershed. The water comes from somewhere. When it rains, it has to go somewhere, and we can break this down using geography. So when we take a look at this one, this is the Buffalo River watershed, and it's actually broken down into other miniature watersheds. This is not a large area. It takes up Newton County, Searcy County, and a small part of Marion County. But what you need to remember is the headwaters of the Buffalo River are into western parts of Newton County. So if there's a storm that falls over that part of Newton County and produces 6-7 inches of rain, all that rain is going to flow its way eventually into the Buffalo River, and that's going to cause the Buffalo River to rise. And that has happened. And you may think, the Buffalo River is usually pretty tame. Yes, it floods from time to time, but it's nothing crazy. Well, look at this. This is from Buffalo National River Post back in 2015. And what you see there is a photograph by Scott Burns, December 3rd, 1982. And that is over the Highway 14 bridge, Dillard's Ferry crossing. And if you're familiar with this area, you know the Buffalo River is usually well below that bridge. The Buffalo River is usually 2 to 3 feet in some locations. Well, this river during that time frame rose to 53 feet. So any small creek or stream has the capability in some terms to climb 20, 30 feet above its normal location. Another river you may have heard is the Nolichucky, and this was influenced by Helene, who produced devastating flood impacts across North Carolina, but also Tennessee. Even though Tennessee did not see much in the form of heavy rain, they still got catastrophic flooding from the Nolichucky. And the reason behind that is we have huge mountains, 5,000, 6,000 foot mountains right along the spine of the Appalachians through northeast Tennessee and northwest North Carolina. And you see this highlighted area right here in North Carolina is the headwaters of the Nolichucky. When Helene made its way up in that part of North Carolina, it hit those mountains. Orographic lifting happened, or basically the moisture from Helene, all the tropical moisture, hit the mountains, cool condensed, rang out like a sponge, and produced totals here that you see by the National Weather Service of over 20 inches right along the headwaters of the Nolichucky. So all that water, 20 inches of rain, that's a lot of water in a short amount of time, in about a span of 1 to 2 days. Rushed its way into the Nolichucky, and then that flood wave made its way through Unicoi County, Tennessee, into Greene County, Tennessee, and those areas did not see as much rain. And it caught a lot of people off guard because they didn't know what was happening upstream until it was too late. The flood wave was already in their neighborhood. Boone received 20 inches of rain. Mount Mitchell saw almost 2 feet of rain, and Johnson City, Tennessee saw nearly around 5.5 inches of rain. We're all familiar with what happened here in Arkansas 15 years ago. June 2010, on the 11th, 20 people lost their lives at the Albert Pike Recreation area. This is in the middle of the Ouachitas. Beautiful area. But there was a system, it was a slow-moving system, and it just dumped so much rain in a short amount of time. And here's some of the rainfall totals. This is by the National Weather Service out of Little Rock. And there you see Mount Ida, which is not too far, saw almost 7 inches of rain. And there's the arrow of where Albert Pike is located. If this was a flat area, it would definitely produce flooding. But the problem was it was in a mountainous terrain. So what happened, all that rain fell over these areas, Briar Creek, Long Creek, and that water just rushed its way down the mountain in a rapid fashion, overwhelmed the smaller creeks, and then eventually more rain continued to build its way into the Little Missouri River before it made its way through Albert Pike, and of course produced a flood wave of, I think, like 15, 20 feet in that area. And it happened at night, just like in Texas. This happened 5 o'clock in the morning when people were asleep, and there wasn't much reception out here. You don't get cell phone reception in this part of Arkansas. So the only warning system that they had potentially was a no-weather radio, but a lot of people don't have theirs. So it's always a good idea to have that no-weather radio if you are doing camping along any type of river. This is a situation into New Mexico, Texas. You see this a lot out to the west because the desert soil is almost like can be a rock or a cement. So if they don't get any rain for a long period of time, it acts like concrete. The rain falls, it goes right into the lowest elevation, and that would be known as, in this case, a dry riverbed or an arroyo. And these areas are very much susceptible to serious flash flooding. So if you see one of these, you don't want to walk up it because there could be a rainstorm 50 miles away producing a lot of heavy rain, and then that flood wave makes its way down the arroyo and could catch you off guard. Next segment, we're going to be talking about how to forecast a flash flood because there's a lot of factors that go into it that come down from the National Weather Service to also other branches of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Stay tuned for that. Meteorologists are always looking at weather patterns, and when we see something that looks a little suspicious in terms of, well, this looks like it's going to bring a lot of moisture, you got a stalled out boundary, everything's coming together for the potential of excessive rainfall, the Weather Prediction Center, which is a branch of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, will issue an excessive rainfall forecast 3 to 7 days out of the actual event. So here's an example of what's happening in terms of this was recorded on July 8th or 7th for the potential low risk of maybe some flooding issues for Texas, Arkansas. The highest risk is in Ohio and also Pennsylvania. But this is just to give meteorologists, broadcast meteorologists, and also meteorologists at local National Weather Services a heads up on, hey, we're watching out for this. You want to watch out for this as well over the next few days. When we get closer to the event, maybe a few days out, then we start looking at other information. This is the River Forecast Center, another division of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and this is broken down in different parts of the United States. And the beauty of this organization is we can look at river gauges across a certain part of the United States. So right now, this is looking at the Arkansas River Basin, Oklahoma, Kansas. Everything is green, so all the rivers are relaxed. There's no flooding happening in this part of the area whatsoever. And we can click on this, and this is all available to the public. All you have to do is just Google this, and you'll find it very easily. But let's take a look at the Arkansas River at Dardanelle. And there's the forecast, and there's the observed. So there's no concern. There could be some minor rises, but there's no concern with this whatsoever. When we go down here into Texas, where we have some flooding happening, this is known as minor flood in the orange. We don't have any major floods happening. Let's go here, the Guadalupe River, and you see that river did rise over the past day or so, or it's forecasted to rise. So here's observed forecast, and for July 8th, it is expected to make a significant rise. So we go from 10 feet to 22 feet. But in terms of the river stage, that's known as minor flooding. So meteorologists are going to be looking at this, and then the hydrologist of the National Weather Service will issue a forecast for the local rivers. Not every river across the region has a forecast, but we do have river gauges across a large part of the country. Another area we look at is the flash flood guidance. So this is looking at the flash flood guidance to say you need this amount of rain in 1 hour to produce flash flooding. And at this time of the forecast, it's showing here in Arkansas, you need 2.5 to 3 inches of rain to produce flash flooding. This also takes into account the soil moisture that's already in place, the type of soil. Will it run off right away, or will it actually start to penetrate into the ground and get soaked up by some of the soil or other vegetation? But this is broken down into 1 hour values, 3 hour values, 6 hour values. So how long it takes for a flash flood to happen within 6 hours. We have a lot of information out there to look at rivers and figure out this river's flood stage, this river's fine. And this is known as the stream flow. This is also available to the public. This is all by the USGS. And what is really cool about this is we can go in and we can choose maybe something here. Let's go to the Buffalo River, for example, at Ponca. And it gives you all the information, but what's really neat is you can go to the peak tab here. I'm going to zoom in. And you can see what this river has produced in the past. So the Buffalo River at Ponca reached a maximum recently of 24 feet back November 2024. And then it shows you also how fast it was moving. So if you live next to a river or a stream and you want to know, okay, what's the history of this? Use this website. This is a great website. And these colors will change in real time to let you know what's happening across the state. And there's the color explanations right there. Low goes to different colors from red to blue. Once you get to black, that's high. And it looks like it's high for the White River near Des Arc. And it gives you all the information. So there's a lot of information there to look at. That's just some of the things that we look at as meteorologists to determine on, okay, is a flash flood imminent? Then we break things down as we get closer and closer to the event. A couple days, the National Weather Service will issue what's known as a flood watch. And this basically says the conditions are in place for the potential of excessive rainfall. Then you go to a flash flood warning, which means flash flooding is expected or it is happening. And a warning is usually smaller for area. It can be just for a part of a river, or it can be for a part of a city that sees excessive amount of rain, because that's known as urban flooding. with poor drainage areas, ponding on the roads, but usually don't have a flash flood emergency for those type of situations unless it's a lot of rainfall, like what happened with Harvey. I mean, that was a flash flood emergency once you got to that situation. But a flash flood emergency is when you have a lot of heavy rain, short amount of time, catastrophic damage, and the worst situation possible is unfolding. So you want to make sure that you get these warning notifications on your NOAA weather radio. I would say NOAA weather radio if you're out in the country and there's no cell phone reception. Your NOAA weather radio can be a life-saving device because you need to know what's happening. You're going to the Buffalo River. Please, 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 please stay alert. Even though it could be forecast of 20% chance of rain. If there's a storm that develops over the headwaters of the Buffalo, that can change rapidly and you can get in a life-threatening situation if you're not paying attention and if you don't get those warnings. We're going to talk about the next thing, the power of water, and why you never want to drive through floodwaters, no matter what. Stay tuned. Well, I found this pretty cool calculator from the USGS, and this really breaks things down for you on how significant flooding really is. So this is known as the rainfall calculator, and I took the area roughly of Albert Pike, which is about 40 acres. We'll round it off to 50 acres, but I said 7 inches of rain fell within that 50-acre plot. How much water was produced if 7 inches of rain fell across that region? It says here over 9.5 million gallons of water entered into that area and then went down the Little Missouri River. So that just gives you an idea of really the power of water. And when we talk about the power of water, here's another thing. So we talk about the discharge when it comes to how fast a river is moving. The white water rafters always talk about this, and of course people that work on a dam talk about the cubic feet per second. So when you think about that, that is, you know, about the size of a basketball passing a point within a second of a time. So think about 1,000 cubic feet per second is equal to the river moving 1 mile per hour. And the rough estimate, a cubic foot of water weighs 62.4 pounds. That's a lot of strength behind water. And that's why you never underestimate the power of water. So let's go over to flooding facts, because this is what you want to keep in mind when we always talk about turn around, don't drown, stay out of floodwaters, especially if it's moving. Here's a reminder. 6 inches of moving water can knock a person off their feet. If you've tried to do some hiking and you've crossed these streams and creeks, you can feel the power, especially if it's moving real fast. 6 inches, yeah, it can definitely take you out. Most cars lose control and stall possibly within 6 inches of moving water. Once we get to a foot of moving water, most vehicles will float and can be carried away by the current. 2 feet of water that's moving, SUVs, pickup trucks don't have a chance and will be carried downstream by the current. So we always say this, but we always see people do it. Do not drive through floodwaters, especially if the current is moving, because you're taking a chance that you're not going to ruin your vehicle, but also you may get into a life or death situation very quickly anytime there's moving water. And also, you don't know if the road is there, if the bridge is there, it may be washed out. That water may be hiding the danger just underneath, and you're cruising along thinking, oh, okay, this is no big deal, I'm just going to go right through it, and then all of a sudden there's a sinkhole or there's no more road there, you're in trouble. We see people drive through floodwaters, the standing floodwaters, still not the best idea, just because it may not be necessarily a life and death situation. but you can ruin your car. You just don't know how deep the water is typically. If you can't see the bottom of it, don't take a chance because you're thinking, oh, it may only be 12 inches deep, and then all of a sudden you keep driving and driving and driving, and it gets 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep, and then you're like, well, how did I get myself into this situation? Because you didn't make the smartest decision. So tell your friends and family, do not take chances when it comes to floodwaters. And also stay out of floodwaters. You don't know what's in it. There could be chemicals in it. There could be wildlife that you don't want to encounter in it. Floodwaters are just dirty, disgusting, and it's just not smart. There could be bacteria in it. There could be other microorganisms that you should not be in contact with. Stay out of floodwaters. Yes, it's tempting to go do some fun stuff, water ski, or you see it on social media accounts. They want attention, just not the smartest thing. Flooding happens. If you live next to a river, it's going to flood. It may flood this year. It may flood 10 years from now. It may flood 100 years from now. But especially if you live in a hilly terrain situation. And flash flooding can also happen on the mountainsides. When I was in Tennessee, just to wrap things up here, they had a flash flood. The rain happened on top of the mountain. It was a lot of rain. It was the Buffalo Mountain in northeast Tennessee, very close to Johnson City. And it came down and it rushed down just like a flood wave and took out a campsite in that part of Tennessee. Fortunately, there was no camp at that time. There were a few people there, but they were fine. However, just to see the power of water, a mudslide, that's just something you have to keep in mind. Never underestimate the power of nature. With that said, thanks for watching Weatherwise. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you soon. Take care.